the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:09 p.m. in an extremely cold, miserable, wet, humid, grim city of Budapest, where you're really getting a sense that fall is not far away. I mean, I've already commented on the fact that the days are getting remarkably short, but today and this week as a whole is giving you a real sense of the end of summer and the consistent misery index through the fall and the winter. So on that happy note, welcome everybody who has joined me. And obviously, there's several things we need to get to. What remarkably yesterday, during dinner at the White House for Benjamin Netanyahu, Netanyahu leaned over and produced a letter that he, Netanyahu, had written to the Nobel Committee nominating Trump for the Peace Prize. Trump was naturally very happy about that. But at the same time, Netanyahu was hardly being very original because, of course, Pakistan had already nominated Trump for the Peace Prize. And one has to wonder, which is wonder, whether anybody in the world will be persuaded by a recommendation from Netanyahu. Imagine, well, I've got Netanyahu recommending me for the Peace Prize. Well, give the man a Peace Prize already. I don't think that's going to carry very much weight. I mean, in fact, if you've got Netanyahu in your corner, that probably guarantees that you will not win the Peace Prize. But Trump seemed very happy with it, and it didn't seem to occur to Trump or to any of Trump's supporters to wonder what exactly has Trump done to deserve a Peace Prize. I mean, you have to, at a minimum, bring peace, or at least make moves to bring peace to get the Peace Prize. Now, when we look around, not only has Trump not brought peace, but it seems that we're on track for continuing and indeed exacerbating Biden's wars. Case in point, Trump's remarkable tirade today during a cabinet meeting about Russia in general and President Putin in particular. So let's take a look at what Trump said during this cabinet meeting.
Just sort of turning back to Russia, if there's anything that you would signal about your displeasure with them.
Well, just look, I'm very unhappy with them. There's no reason for this. It's turned out to be tougher, but it's only tougher. And I will say the Ukrainians were brave, but we gave them the best equipment ever made. We gave them the anti-tank busters that knocked out tanks. I mean, you just aim them in the direction of the tank, and the tank is gone. We gave them missiles, the latest and the greatest. They were able to shoot down a lot of things that would have normally wiped out probably would have been a very quick war. It would have been a war that lasted 3, 4 days, but they had the benefit of unbelievable equipment. And Europe gave it to. We gave them far more because Biden shouldn't have done that. He should have equalized. We should have given them the same, or we should have given actually less than Europe. It affects Europe much more than us, but we're in there for over $300 billion. Europe's in there for over 100 billion, but still, Europe gave a lot. And I will say this: the Ukrainians, whether you think it's unfair that we gave all that money or not, they were very brave because somebody had to operate that stuff. And a lot of people I know wouldn't be operating it; they wouldn't have the courage to do it. So they fought very bravely. But we gave them the best equipment in the world. We make the best military equipment by far. There's nobody close. You look at other equipment from other countries, it's not even close. That's why everybody wants to buy our equipment. And that's why we're going to step up these contractors now that make it, and they're brilliant, but they make it too slowly. And we have to step them up, Pete, and let them make it at a much higher rate. Unfortunately, we have to do that. But if you look at our Patriots, if you look at our Tomahawks, if you look at our, what we do with tanks is you wouldn't want to be driving a tank. You would feel nice and secure, but they are javelins, they're called. And I gave them the javelins. Remember, they said Trump gave the javelins and Obama gave them sheets, right?
So here, Trump starts with this, extraordinarily tedious talking point that he's repeated ad nauseum for years and years and years about these javelins, which, something that happened was 2018, so that already happened 7 years ago, but he still seems to be stuck in that thing about the javelin, even though the amount of military hardware that has gone to Ukraine, is way kind of eclipsed those wretched javelins. But what's interesting is that he seems to tout this, that this is really great, just sending in more hardware. So let's continue with his this tirade during this the cabinet meeting.
They called Obama at that time. Barack Hussein Obama, if you haven't heard, did a terrible job. But that was a war that should have never happened, and a lot of people are dying, and it should end. And I don't know, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin. For you want to know the truth, it's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to say anything? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move?
I'm looking at it. Yeah, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Did you sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They pass it totally at my option, and to terminate totally at my option. And I'm looking at it very strongly.
Yesterday, you said
Go ahead, please.
The Council of Economic Advisors released a new report saying that imported goods.
And then it goes on here.
We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people, and a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers mostly. We get a lot of.
All right. So we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, and then he said, "I'm not happy with Putin," and so on. So now, you can dislike Putin, you can dislike Russia, you can oppose Russia in this war. The one thing you can't say is that Russia has in any way been inconsistent. Russia has been extraordinarily consistent in setting out its objectives and in making clear what it will and will not settle for. So when he says, "Oh, well, Putin, has given us a lot of bullshit, and then it's all meaningless," well, Putin has said nothing. He has never changed his position. Nothing at all. There's been no change in Russia's position. Russia has made clear it's not going to accept NATO on its borders. It's not going to accept Ukraine in NATO, and it's made clear that it will not accept any kind of a ceasefire that would entail NATO giving Ukraine breathing room and NATO to continue to arm Ukraine. That's his position. But of course, Putin had also made clear that if you want a ceasefire, and he said there are two conditions under which we would accept a ceasefire. One, you absolutely have to unconditionally pledge that you will not use the ceasefire to send in arms for Ukraine. That's one possible acceptable ceasefire. Or Ukraine could just simply withdraw its forces from the four oblasts and pledge not to join NATO. So it's always very, if you want to spell out Russia's position, it's very easy to do. I mean, they've said it over and over again. It's Trump who keeps changing his position. And so venting this frustration at Putin as if somehow it's all bullshit he's throwing at you. He's saying the same thing that he's always said. You may regard it as bullshit, but nonetheless, that's Russia's position, and Russia's not going to shift from that position. But now, after and you saw what he said there about the sanctions. Oh yeah, I'm looking at it, so I might sign on to the sanctions bill that will be moved in the Senate by Lindsey Graham. But what is now striking is that when last week during our live stream, we discussed the announcement from the Pentagon that they were going to hold back various arms deliveries to Ukraine because the U.S. Was running short. In particular, the Patriot interceptor missiles, some of the Stingers, and some of the sort of air launched the Hellfire missiles. So they said, we're just running short. We can't provide them. This was we talked about this, and I expressed skepticism because it seemed as if it was deja vu all over again. We've been through this process a number of times before, whereby it seems like the United States is going to hold back on deliveries for Ukraine, and then the United States abruptly changes its view. I mean, obviously, it happened during Trump's first term when there was the $500 million appropriation for Ukraine that was signed, that was allocated by Congress, and then Trump decided that he was going to put a halt on that, and then he kind of changed his view, and of course he got impeached for it because the Democrats claimed, he put a halt on it only because Zelensky wouldn't play ball with him on getting what they called getting dirt on Biden. But Trump got the worst of all worlds. The arms were delivered for Ukraine, and he got himself impeached for it. So, but then in the early days of Trump's return to power, there was another stoppage, and then Hegseth put a stop on it, and then Hegseth canceled the stoppage, and then of course last year, I think it was either 2024. Yes, you remember there was the Republicans in Congress were holding up aid for Ukraine. Suddenly, all these America First Republicans saying, no, not one penny more for Zelensky. And they, it just wouldn't move. They wouldn't take up the issue on the House floor until Trump made his intervention along with Speaker Mike Johnson and said, yeah, I think we should absolutely send this 60 billion for Ukraine. That was Trump made that move. Trump and Mike Johnson went to the floor. It was voted on, and it was always going to be voted on because 100% of the Democrats were going to vote for it. So even if half the Republicans didn't vote for any more for Ukraine, it passed the House very easily, and of course it passed the Senate very easily. So again, that was a lot of excitement. Oh, no more aid for Ukraine, and then aid goes to Ukraine. So then we had the disastrous meeting in the Oval Office with Zelensky, and Trump really was very unhappy, expressed his unhappiness with Zelensky quite openly, and then we heard the announcement that all further aid was now stopped, all intelligence sharing was stopped, and then lo and behold, shortly afterwards, aid and intelligence sharing was resumed. So something like this was, I always felt when that news came last week from the Pentagon, oh, well, that's it, the cupboard is bare, we got nothing more to send. Ukraine, I had my doubts. I thought, I think they're gonna, they're gonna change their minds again. And lo and behold, that's exactly what has just happened. So if you look at the coverage, and the first of all, what was interesting. This is a story from a couple of days ago that about saying that which says Trump hints at new sanctions on Russia amid ongoing fighting with Ukraine. So after all the talk, Trump hasn't added any new sanctions on Russia. He's just simply continued with the Biden sanctions. Now it's reported that Trump is thinking of new sanctions on Russia and said, that U.S. President Donald Trump has said that his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin understands that more sanctions may be coming as Moscow continues to reject Washington's push for a ceasefire. And then Trump says, we talk about sanctions a lot, and he understands that it may be coming. And then he goes on. And Trump's remarks also elaborated on his earlier comment that he was disappointed by his phone call with Putin on July the 3rd. He wants to go all the way, just keep killing people. It's just what he said at the cabinet meeting. Just to keep killing people, it's no good, he said, adding that he was very unhappy with the Kremlin leader. Hours earlier, Trump had what he called a good call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. And then since taking office, Trump has not imposed any new sanctions on Russia. His administration has also relaxed enforcement. Experts say Trump has countered that imposing sanctions on Russia would hurt peace negotiations. And then Trump had also confirmed that he and Zelensky had spoken about air defense and so on. And it's true that he not only did he not impose any new sanctions, but he did ease some of the sanctions. For instance, he did ease the sanctions on Gazprom Bank as a favor for his friend, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban needs that Gazprom Bank, otherwise he can't get funding for the nuclear power plant that Russia's building. So that was so he eased the sanctions so that he could get this for Orban. And then he says also on July the 4th, Trump discussed the Patriot missiles in a call with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. And then Berlin had raised the possibility that it would buy Patriots from Washington and then provide them to Kiev. So here was then the story in Politico. So Politico was which broke the story last week about the halt in arms deliveries, has now broken the story saying, oh, halted military aid for Ukraine may start flowing again. And then halted shipments of some American military aid to Ukraine could resume after a series of high-level meetings in Italy and Ukraine over the coming week. And then President Trump's Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg will meet with Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov in Rome at an international aid conference, followed by a meeting in Kiev this week and next. And then the Ukrainian government sees the resumption of air defense, blah, blah. And then the U.S. has indicated to Kiev that deliveries of engineering equipment and some armored vehicles will resume soon, though no timeline has been given yet. And then speaking to reporters on Monday night, which is yesterday night, Trump confirmed that more aid would be sent to Ukraine, but did not offer specifics. We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. We have to send more weapons, defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard. So many people are dying in that mess. So when you read this, Trump has now completely embraced the Biden NATO position. Oh, it's all defensive. We got to provide them with defensive. Of course, it's always defensive military hardware because they have to be able to fight themselves. Well, that's the guarantee to keep the war going. I mean, that's always been the obvious that is the way to ensure that the war continues. I mean, he says, "Oh, so many people are dying and so many people are getting killed." Yeah, so you're sending more weapons to ensure that more and more people are going to will die and get killed. I mean, it's obvious, and that was the position of Biden and the position of NATO. That's what NATO is in this business. NATO wants to continue with this war. The only way this war could end is if the United States essentially says, "But that's it. We're not going to underwrite Ukraine anymore. We just think that this is a complete waste of human life. It's not a winnable war. Ukraine cannot win this war, and that continuing to arm Ukraine only guarantees that the war continues and the killing continues." And therefore, that was the only way. It was always the only way this war could end. If you don't take that course, then you're just basically continuing with the Biden policy. And so, okay, if your goal is to get a Nobel Peace Prize, what you're getting is the prize for continuing the war. Anyway, if you look at some more of this on this story, and here we have the story in the Guardian. Also delighted. Donald Trump said on the U.S. would resume shipments of defensive weapons primarily in a reversal of only a days-old decision to withhold their supply. And then it goes on. Soon after Trump spoke on Monday, the Pentagon released a statement, and the statement says, at President Trump's direction, the Department of Defense is sending additional defensive weapons to Ukraine. This is such nonsense of trying to distinguish between defensive and offensive weapons. I mean, it's like all weapons, by definition, are offensive. To ensure the Ukrainians can defend themselves. To ensure that we go on fighting. While we work to secure a lasting peace and ensure the killing stops. So you ensure the killing stops by keeping the war going. I mean, that's it. a perfect encapsulation of the logic of NATO. Our framework for POTUS to evaluate military shipments across the globe remains in effect and is integral to our America First defense priorities. Much of that is just gobbledygook. And then the Washington Post, Trump says U.S. will resume weapons deliveries to Ukraine. President Trump said Monday that the United States would send more weapons to Ukraine to aid in its war against Russia, days after the White House announced that the Pentagon had halted deliveries of some key weapons. And then again, quote Trump, and then they said among the weapons paused were air defense missiles, and then Trump's comments appear to be an abrupt turnaround from last week when White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly said that the Defense Department had decided to halt some shipments to Ukraine after a review found the American military stockpiles to be low. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell said at the time that the department was conducting an ongoing review of military aid to countries, including Ukraine. And then Trump also lamented Monday that Russia had continued its attacks on Ukraine. I'm not happy with President Putin at all. And then they're quoting. And then the New York Times says Trump's U-turn on weapons leaves Ukrainians hopeful but cautious. After President Trump's announcement that the United States would send more military aid, some were grateful, others were skeptical, mindful of his seesawing policy. And then after Mr. Zelensky met with U.S. business leaders operating in Ukraine, this is the New York Times, after Mr. Zelensky met with U.S. business leaders operating in Ukraine, including Boeing and Baker Hughes, to seek support in lobbying the Trump administration, the American Chamber of Commerce in Kiev issued a statement on July the 4th appealing for more American military aid. So the American Chamber of Commerce now gets to shape U.S. foreign policy. The American Chamber of Commerce in Kiev issued a statement on July the 4th appealing for more American military aid. It's very odd that you would have the American Chamber of Commerce making these kinds of appeals on matters that should be within the purview of an American president, of an elected American president, and particularly an elected American president who had promised, who had campaigned on being a peacemaker and someone who's going to end wars. Well, the American Chamber of Commerce issues a statement, and the statement asked Mr. Trump to, quote, protect American businesses in Ukraine by urgently providing the defense equipment needed to stop these attacks. Then you kind of wonder, why would an American president need to protect American businesses in Ukraine? I mean, the American businesses in Ukraine took a risk in investing in Ukraine, in investing in a war-torn country, in investing in a war zone. They can't then turn around and say that the American government is supposed to come in and protect them because they are supposedly getting hammered because they're in the war zone. But the statement said, asked Mr. Trump to protect American businesses in Ukraine by urgently providing the defense equipment needed to stop these attacks. More than half of the about 600 members of the chamber, the statement said, have suffered damage to offices, factories, or other assets from the Russian invasion. And again, you ask, well, who cares? Why do I care that they have suffered? And I'm doubtless, I think, oh, well, hey, he's Mr. America First. He's the guy who says, buy American, hire American. So if more than half of the 600 members of the chamber have suffered damage to offices, then that should rile up Trump and say, I got to do something. And maybe that did move Trump. Hey, American businesses are getting hammered, even though, he should be thinking, well, why the hell are American businesses there to begin with? And then here, then again, is the Times saying that Trump is increasingly making clear that Putin is impeding the peace deal he wants to make. And then, notably, Mr. Trump refused on Tuesday to say whether he knew in advance about the pause on munitions shipments. While seated beside his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Mr. Trump was repeatedly pressed about who ordered the pause. I don't know, he said to the reporter. Why don't you tell me? But clearly, Trump is distancing himself from the pause. And then throughout his remarks, the president repeatedly railed against how Russia is carrying out its war against Ukraine. We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now because he's killing a lot of people. At another point, he said Mr. Putin was not treating human beings right, adding that the Russian president was killing too many people, so we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine. Now, again, you hate to say, well, people are getting killed because there's something of a war on in Ukraine. And as I said, Russia has not changed its objectives. Russia has been very clear about what its goals are. At no point in any of the phone conversations with Trump, and we've read the Russian readouts, we've read Trump's readouts. At no point did the Russians give any indication that they were willing to settle for an immediate ceasefire. Now, the other thing is, and we'll come to that in a minute, is this whole thing about, people are getting killed, people are getting, Trump kind of doing his, weeping, doing supposedly this humanitarian. He's so upset about people getting killed. This is a person who doesn't seem to get at all upset about anyone getting killed in Gaza, obviously. He also did seem very upset about all the people that Israel killed during the 12-day war that he's continually boasting about. Israel killed an awful lot of people. And of course, during the targeted assassinations, many completely innocent civilians, women and children, were killed. Because the Israel policy is you target this person, he's asleep in his apartment, so you just hit the apartment building in the middle of the night, and of course everyone else who happens to be living in the same apartment building will also be killed. That doesn't seem to upset Trump. But now he said, all these people are getting killed. I'm having real difficulties with this, because I'm such a moral person. I have such difficulties living with killings and death. I'm a peacemaker, and so now the peacemaker is saying he's going to be sending weapons there. We're sending defensive weapons. Yes, it's just defensive. It's just purely defensive. They don't do any harm. They're just defensive. Anyway, so that's the Times story, and then Lindsey Graham, Lady Lindsey, issued this tweet today. He says, "I very much appreciate President Trump's efforts to end the bloodbath in Ukraine, but it takes willing partners. Ukraine has said yes to ceasefires and to any and all meeting requests, while Putin continues to defy peace efforts. It is now time to put more tools in President Trump's toolbox in order to end the war. I expect the Senate will move the bipartisan Russia sanctions bill that will allow tariffs and sanctions to be placed on countries who prop up Putin's war machine and do not help Ukraine. The bill will have a presidential waiver to give President Trump maximum leverage. This bill has 85 co sponsors and counting. It is time to end this bloodbath. Now, this Russia sanctions bill, and we've talked about it, of course, primarily targets third countries. It doesn't really target Russia. So it's like, we've done all the sanctions against Russia. So it's not doing anything against Russia. It's hitting other countries. One of which is, of course, the United States itself, which purchases uranium from Russia. But in doing this, Trump is essentially embracing the very policy that he said he would end. I mean, he said he would end the war. But you can't end the war by continuing a war. That's the sort of the NATO convoluted logic, that somehow, bombs for peace, as a famous author wrote, that's bombs for peace. And if you bomb a country, you deliver peace. So if you send weapons, you get to peace. The more weapons we send to Ukraine, the faster will Putin come to the negotiating table. I mean, NATO's been repeating this for more than 3 years. It's clearly false, but it's a great public relations exercise because the media repeat this, and it sort of makes sense in a kind of loony way. And like the cliche of if you want peace, prepare for war. Oh yeah, that's great, that's fantastic. Or peace through strength. Yeah, fantastic. Let's be strong and let's arm, and then we get peace. Now, of course, common sense and historical experience tell you that if you arm and you keep building up more and more arms for yourself, that doesn't bring you peace. That only means that your neighbors or your adversaries begin to get very nervous because they think that you are planning a war, and therefore they're going to start preparing for war themselves. It's an obvious logical issue. You don't get peace through strength. You get peace through peace. If you want peace, then deliver peace. But if you're going to arm, if you're going to send weapons to Ukraine, you guarantee that the war continues. And if you guarantee that the war continues, not only does Trump not get the Nobel Peace Prize, it guarantees that whoever comes after Trump, 2028, and the 2028 campaign will begin soon after the 2026 midterms. So the 2028 campaign will be somebody saying, hey, it's the opportunity for somebody like J.D. Vance, maybe Marco Rubio to say, look, Trump failed. He said he was going to bring peace. He failed. I'm going to bring peace. Now, of course, the Democrats will argue something else. They'll say, no, the way to bring peace is to send even more arms to Ukraine. So that's one war that it seems like Trump is now wading into. He has absolutely no idea how to extricate himself from this. It was always obvious that the only way that you can do this, it's tough, it's cruel, it's brutal, whatever, was to cut off Ukraine. It's the only way you can do it. And he could have done it soon after the election because he had a mandate. You can basically coast along on your great election victory. But now time has elapsed, and he's been all over the place, confusing everybody what his policy is. And as we looked at these stories, even Ukraine is confused. Everybody's confused as to what the policy is. And he doesn't. He has no idea what to do. And this is why um, what he conveys most of all is that he's a weak leader, and because that's what weak leaders do. They kind of try one thing, they try something else, and then they kind of change their minds. They don't really take the issue and go with it. I mean, if you have someone like Nixon was a very strong leader because he kind of figured out what he needs to do to extricate the United States from Vietnam, and is going to make a lot of people unhappy. He knew that he was going to make a lot of people very unhappy. He would make the South Vietnamese government very unhappy by what he was going to do, but he had to do it. But Trump doesn't do that. Now, the other thing, as I mentioned at the beginning, was the Netanyahu dinner last night, and at this dinner, when Netanyahu said, "Hey, I wrote this letter recommending you for the Nobel Peace Prize." Can you imagine the Nobel Committee thinking, "Wow, we got a letter from Bibi. We got to take that seriously." But then something else happened during this dinner, and I just want to show you this.
Do you think that there can be a two-state solution that creates an independent?
I don't know. I asked Bibi that question. You have the greatest man in the world to answer that age-old question, two-state. Go ahead. You give him your honest answer.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands. Now, that is a fact, and no one in Israel will agree to anything else because we don't commit suicide. We want life, we cherish life for ourselves, for our neighbors.
Let's just go back a bit again. Let's listen to this, because there's the question that was asked and how Trump punted on that. Where are we? Because okay.
But none of the powers.
No, it's not.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands. Now, that is a fact, and no one in Israel will agree to anything else because we don't commit suicide. We want life, we cherish life for ourselves, for our neighbors, and I think we can work out a peace between us and the entire Middle East with President Trump's leadership, and by working together, I think we can establish a very, very broad peace that will include all our neighbors.
Mr. President, question on Iran.
So that was a moment. Trump is asked. The official U.S. position has been for 30 years to support a two-state solution. So Trump was asked this question. He just said, "Well, I'll give it to Bibi." Why would you give it to Bibi? Who's in charge of U.S. foreign policy? I mean, this is U.S. foreign policy. Every president, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Biden had, at least officially, proclaimed that that the United States supports a two-state solution. And then Trump just didn't say anything. I mean, he could have said, he's the president. You're the goddamn president of the United States. You are responsible for the foreign policy of the United States. You asked the question, what do you think about the two-state solution? And I said, well, I'll give it to Bibi. Let Bibi answer. Why are you letting Bibi answer that? That's going to be, yeah, of course he's going to say that. What is the U.S. view of that? And of course, in that answer, Netanyahu has basically said, no, there's not going to be a two-state solution. All the security is going to be in our hands, so it's not going to be a state in any sense. The Palestinians will have all power, except any power, what he called to threaten us, which means we're going to run their affairs, because any time they run anything, they're going to threaten us. And so that's the position of that. So let's go on, just listen a little bit more of this this conversation.
You've asserted that there's a complete and total destruction of the nuclear facilities. So what is the basis of the talks going forward? Is it to cap future nuclear activity, is it ballistic missiles, terror support, economic-based opportunities? What are
It's really a good question, because if you remember when it was done, I sort of said, what's the purpose of talking? It's been knocked out completely. But they've requested a meeting, and I'm going to go to a meeting, and if we can put something down on paper, that will be fine, that'll be good. I think they've gained a lot of respect for us. I think they've gained a lot of respect for Israel also. But they would like to meet, and we're going to have a meeting. Steve, when is that meeting going to be? Do you want to say?
Rather, very quickly, in the next week or so.
So we'll see what happens. I think it would be nice to memorialize it, put it down, but because of the incredible result of that attack, if you want to call it an attack, I didn't think it was necessary to have it in writing. I think we spoke. I mean, that speaks much louder than writing. But I can also understand why they'd want it. And they've been very nice. They've been very respectful. And it began by them telling us about 14. They had to do. You know what 14 represents, right? Do you know what 14 represents? Right? You know that, right? The number of bombs dropped. So it was, representative. We got them all. Please, behind you, please. No, you.
So this is better for the Prime Minister. The likely next mayor of New York City or
Okay. So there's Trump saying, "Oh well, the Iranians have got this respect for us." No evidence that they have any particular respect, or certainly no evidence that they have any particular respect for Israel. But nonetheless, he's claiming that there's going to be this some sort of a meeting with the Iranians, but it's a bit unlikely there's going to be any meeting anytime in the near future. It's quite likely that Iran was just going to slow walk it. They think they have no particular reason to do anything very much. They say, "Hey, look, well, you've hit our nuclear facilities. We really don't know what state the facilities are in. I mean, you can't just come in and start looking around, because we ourselves have no idea what's really happened." So I think they're going to slow walk it. Interesting lineup at the American table. So we see John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, who is of course a shill for Mossad. He's at the table at the dinner. Then sitting next to him was the fanatical Zionist the U.S. ambassador to Israel. And then we have Susie Wiles, who, the Washington Post reported this a week or so ago, had actually, she's a political hack. She was as a political consultant in 2020, had gone to Israel to work for Netanyahu because Netanyahu was in political trouble, and he, he needed somebody to come in and help him out. And Susie Wiles, her political consultant firm, came in and to work for him. So interesting. She's at the table. She's White House chief of staff. Why is the White House chief of staff sitting at the table? And it was kind of, as I say, remarkable that, given the question, a very fundamental question, well, what do you think of the two-state solution? I mean, that's that's been supposedly the American position since Oslo. And he said he just cedes the room to Netanyahu. It's a very you really get a sense here, as with no other leader, the extent to which Trump cedes the room to Netanyahu. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the questions from Gagglers. The people who make sure that the dogs are fed and kept in fighting trim. So I really appreciate the Gagglers. And the first question is from Danaki. Always good to see you, Danaki. And Danaki says, Kedvesh George, dear George, I'm so relieved. Aren't you relieved that Epstein had no client list and suicided himself, and that Trump wasn't the one responsible for the Ukraine weapons holdup, which is now resolved so they can flow again? All hail BRICS power and de-dollarization. Take it away, Pepe. Pepe is, of course, Pepe Escobar. Yes, now, I have to say that on the Jeffrey Epstein thing, I've fairly consistently been a little skeptical about the claims that have been made for the on behalf of the supposed ring that Epstein was running. I'm not sure for whom, a kind of blackmail, extortion ring involving child prostitution, and all the richest and most powerful men in the world who apparently were kept under control by Epstein, and therefore there was this vast enterprise that he ran, and that therefore it was crucial to bump him off, because otherwise so many powerful men would be exposed. Now, I remember when the Epstein case first burst in out in the open. It was really a long time ago. It was I guess it was maybe about 18 years ago. And at the time, nobody really was talking about any vast enterprise that Epstein supposedly ran. The issue was, well, why did Epstein get this very lenient treatment? He'd had sex with underage girls, and he got lenient treatment. Now, I didn't necessarily think that it was really that surprising. In that, first of all, from what one could gather, as when the case, from what one read on the cases, was that, well, he was obviously a very rich man, and then, and that is still a mystery how he got to be so rich. But nonetheless, he was a very rich man. He had, he did have sex with, they were underage, but nonetheless, they weren't exactly children. They were underage, depending on what the age of consent is. Anywhere, age of consent varies very drastically. In a country, I think it's Hungary, I think the age of consent is 14. I mean, but in various states in the United States, the age of consent varies. I think basically the courts thought that they didn't think this was anything terribly big that was going on here. That was not nice to think that. They thought it was basically these were lower class girls. He was paying them for sex, and basically, I think their view was no harm, no foul, and he got remarkably lenient treatment. I didn't think it was remarkable, but nonetheless, people were upset about it, and he went on. And then the story was kind of forgotten. Some journalists kind of kept it going over the years, and then it suddenly it kind of burst out in the open. There was a series of articles. Already it was many years later. It was a series of articles about it, and then the case was revived, and then he was he was arrested, and then he died. He died. Now, I don't know the circumstances of his death, but at the same time, I don't think it's wholly implausible that a man who had become used to, I mean, he's a very rich man, a man who is used to living in considerable comfort, would decide, knowing after his arrest and that he was facing whatever, I mean, 100 years in prison, given the agitation. This was really after the Me Too movement and whatever, and considering that what he faced in prison, that he would kill himself. Now, of course, I know I'm going to get criticized. How can you think anything of the sort, and so on? But then you'd have to say, where's the evidence? I would turn it around. Where's the evidence that he was running this international blackmail extortion ring involving the most powerful men in the world? See, in the first place, it's not a good business model to start blackmailing anyone. I mean, if you start, you blackmail one person, chances are others are going to find out about it, and then they're going to drop you very quickly. I mean, you're not going to be able to have among your friends, Bill Gates and all the rest of them, Alan Dershowitz and all the people who hung around with him. Once anyone got a sense that he was in the business of blackmailing, entrapping people and then blackmailing them, it's just not a good business model. I mean, it's like no one's going to associate with you if they think that this is what you do, this is how you make money. Why did people associate with Epstein? Well, because he's very wealthy. That's what people do. That's what happens. And somebody who's got a lot of money, he doesn't have difficulties finding friends. He doesn't have difficulties finding people who want to hang out with him. So now, as I say, first of all, I want to see some evidence as to where are these these the receipts of this blackmail extortion ring. I mean, I might believe it if I saw just one scintilla of evidence about it. This has been going on for many years, and yet we haven't seen this. That, on the other hand, I do think that it's remarkable how a lot of these kind of right-wing influencers who have been peddling the whole Epstein thing for years and years and years, I think have been made to look rather silly. Chiefly, Dan Bongino and of course Kash Patel, because both of them, during the time that they were essentially campaigning for Trump and campaigning to get the kinds of jobs that they now hold, they were in fact continually suggesting that there was the Jeffrey Epstein list. They were the ones who kind of were putting that around, though they had no proof of anything. But it was great to go on their podcasts and talk about this the Jeffrey Epstein list. Oh, they know all about the suicide. Oh, there's no suicide. No. They never had anything. They never had anything. They were bullshitting for years and years. Whipping the followers into a fervor, but they never delivered. Because as far as I can see, there may well not have been anything to deliver. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there really was something. I just haven't seen any evidence of this. And of course, there was Pam Bondi herself, who said in February, that the Epstein list was on her desk. It's on her desk. The list is on her desk. So presumably she's going to, look at it, and then release it. And then, of course, what she did was she released this dud of the Epstein file in February. So there was nothing in that. Whatever she released was just simply, old stuff that had appeared in in newspapers over the years. Was nothing new in it. And then, well, we then had that interview with Kash Patel and Bongino when they expressed some skepticism about the theory that there was the death of Epstein was anything other than suicide. And now finally we're saying, like, we don't have anything. So ultimately, if one says, well, I don't believe any of it, fine, you don't believe anything, but on what evidence are you basing the claim that I don't believe any of this? Other than, well, people want to think that there's some much darker force behind all of this, rather than, maybe there really is just something very mundane and somewhat sordid taste on the part of Jeffrey Epstein. But throughout, and I would have to say throughout all of this, I think I've been consistent in not being persuaded by the claims, and I've never touted the Epstein case, either that the part of it with the that there existed this international blackmail extortion ring, or that somehow he couldn't possibly have killed himself, even though you have to say the motive for suicide was quite strong. Given the fervor against him, the hysteria, that the anti-Epstein hysteria, by the time he was arrested, he knew he was going away for 100 years. If you've lived, you're used to living the high life for many years. 100 years in prison, that doesn't sound appealing. So, I don't know. But however, I do think that MAGA has kind of by preoccupying itself with this, it now looks a little foolish, because now I guess they'd have to say, well, Bongino and Kash Patel are covering up. They're covering it up. They're part of they're part of the cover-up conspiracy. But then you'd have to say, well, why would they do that? What would be their motivation in covering anything up? So, no, I just think that if you stake out so many big claims on very, very scant evidence, that the Epstein thing, which to me always seemed like a very sordid case, but the vast superstructure that was built on this, I don't know, it was somebody was going to fall flat on his face. So anyway, but now, the rest of what Danaki says about Trump wasn't the one responsible for Ukraine. Well, yeah, no, that's right. Trump was very good on that. But now Trump is gung ho for sending. Let's send more and more, and to Ukraine, and then the BRICS, and then of course the BRICS and the de-dollarization. What's very funny about BRICS and de-dollarization is that this story that of de-dollarization is now, there's no evidence whatever, that China or anyone else has the slightest interest in creating their own currency, in creating their own reserve, kind of a global reserve currency. And they wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, you can't do it. China essentially still runs a closed economy. If you're going to issue a reserve currency, you've got to open your books. You've got to open your books, and everyone has to know exactly what goes on in China. What are China's assets? What are China's liabilities? There has to be transparency. Otherwise, you can't have a currency. No one's going to invest in a currency when they don't really know the true condition of the Chinese economy. China's never going to do that. China kind of enjoys its kind of very somewhat secretive economy, and therefore the present setup kind of suits China. So therefore China has no interest whatever in issuing its own currency, and let alone a reserve currency. But it's being used by all sorts of opportunists to cause panic in the world, that somehow there's a de-dollarization. Somebody like Steve Bannon, and Bannon is a very sharp operator, makes a lot of money. But what he does is, by creating this panic about that any moment now, the BRICS nations are going to announce their own currency, and that they're going to challenge the dollar. So he has this operation to invest in gold and silver. So, well, you got to invest in gold because otherwise, the dollar is going to be, challenged and shot. So the days of the dollar supremacy are over. You need to invest in gold. That's how Bannon makes a lot of money. And so all these Pepe also, he also has a nice operation in fueling this notion that any minute now, the BRICS nations are going to float their own currency. That's a nice little gig there. And then Bannon has it. So there are a lot of vested interests who are making money in creating this panic that BRICS is about to challenge the supremacy of the dollar. Of course, he's doing nothing of the sort. The BRICS, they come out and they made they issued a very nice. Do I have this? Let's see. What to do? Let me just. I want to show this statement that BRICS issued. I want to that which sounded great, but let me. Okay. Now. Okay. So that's yeah. So. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. See, this is all right. So now let me just. This is the great statement that BRICS issued, which is reads well. It was about the Middle East, and here. It's the strengthening the global South cooperation for a more inclusive and sustainable governance. And then it says, we condemn the military strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which constitute a violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Now, what's missing from that? Oh, they don't mention who it is who launched these military strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Note, incidentally, that the Islamic Republic of Iran is actually now a member of BRICS. So the BRICS issues a statement which foregoes any identification of who it is that bombed one of its members. And then says, constitute a violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. We further express serious concern over the deliberate attacks on civilian infrastructure and peaceful nuclear facilities, also in violation of international law and the IAEA. So that's that. No identification. Who was it? Who did it? No, don't mention that. And then we reiterate our grave concern about the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory with the resumption of continuous Israeli attacks against Gaza and the obstruction of entry of humanitarian aid. And again, we call for adherence to international law, in particular to international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and condemn all violations of international humanitarian law, including the use of starvation and method of warfare. And we also condemn any attempts to politicize or militarize humanitarian assistance. And then we exhort the parties to engage in good faith in further negotiations to achieve an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire, full withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip and all other parts of the occupied Palestinian territory. Now, the reason I bring this up is there's nothing here that is anything. There's nothing bad about any of that. I think it's all very good, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, these are all very very, very commendable sentiments. But it just shows that the BRICS countries, and now the BRICS, that includes Russia, China, India. That's three of the biggies, and of course it includes Indonesia, includes Iran, and ultimately none of these BRICS countries really have any way of influencing events on the ground, and because there really is no multilateral world, that it just doesn't exist. The United States gets to call the shots in the Middle East. Now we can talk, despite all the talk about the decline of the United States, America's, decline, and blah 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 blah. Where is the BRICS peace plan for the Middle East? No, there isn't one. They just simply express their displeasure about what's happening there. Or again, as I say, all very commendable, very much to be approved of, but it means very little. You can talk about international law and international humanitarian law. We can talk about that, and we can talk about the United Nations Charter and everything else. That's fine. But it doesn't it doesn't get us very far. And so that's why, every year we get the big build-up, the big hype about BRICS. And there's always the big hype is always that this time they're really going to come up with some huge, massive initiative, either diplomatic initiative or more likely some economic and financial initiative, like, the launch of a new currency. And it never happens. I think we're going to have to wait a little bit on that multilateral, not multi. What's the word? Multipolar world. The one that Sergei Lavrov talks about. Anyway, thanks a lot, Danaki. And then Summer Petrus, always good to see you. Says the dogs have requested and required me to report on the audio quality or otherwise of the live stream. Thank you for your attention on this matter. Yeah, the dogs have expressed their disquiet about the continuing low audio quality and the continuing inability or unwillingness to address this serious problem. So, thank you for addressing this, Summer Petrus, and yes, I appreciate your attention to this matter. Carlos FR, welcome. Evening, Dr. Samuel. In Gagglers, I just lost my job, got my bike stolen, and my heart broken. Anyway, how's your summer? Better than mine, I hope. Well, that sounds very. I'm sorry to hear all of that. Sorry about your job. Sorry about your bike, and sorry, obviously, about your heartbreak. Well, you still got your health, as people like to say. I hope you still have your health. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear it. But let me say what people say to me in such circumstances, even though I don't necessarily believe it. Things will get better. It's not, things are never as bad as you think they are, and they'll get better soon enough. So you can take that for what it's worth, and believe me and not believe me, but whatever. That's all I can say. But thank you, Carlos. And then the Stone River responds: sometimes being jolted out of the path you are on can open up new, unexpected opportunities, which turn out well. Huh. What was it? When people say that in a movie, you say, as the Chinese say, crisis and opportunity are have the same meaning in Chinese. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I hear in the movies. So anyway, And then Aristotle 1 says, although one shouldn't expect everyone to share one's enthusiasms, okay, I was rather disappointed with your carping at Elon Musk on a recent live stream. Okay, fair enough. If all he had done is buy Twitter and raise the grooming gang issue, he would have done more than anyone today to counter the malign forces that rule over us. He also incidentally brought to the fore the scandal of Ukraine early on. It's clear that he has done and will do more than this, even at the expense of his own vital interests. Okay, I think those are very fair points. I think when we is that what we said in the live stream, because we did a podcast about Elon Musk and launching a new party, and then we did the live stream, and after the podcast, I thought that we probably were unfair to Musk, and then I tried to change that. Change our position in the live stream, because I thought that whether whatever the fate of his political party, whether it has any future, that nonetheless he's somebody who could indeed play an influential role in American politics, and just because it's very hard to challenge the duopoly. That doesn't mean that he can't play an influential role. The thing about, what you said is right about, and this is why when in the live stream I kind of tried to amend what we had said in the podcast. I said that if Musk embraces some issues, make those issues kind of key ones that he's going to fight for, that he's going to underwrite, then I think he could have a huge impact on American life. And one of those issues was the issue of free speech. And I think he did that with Twitter. I think that was a major transformation. If one thinks about how the situation with social media, in particular Twitter, pre-Musk, how terrified everybody was, including me, that basically, you don't follow the party line on anything, you're going to get deplatformed. You're gone. And why that was so significant is that Twitter was pretty much that's how you get known. That's your access to a wider public. And if that platform is closed off to you, you just basically don't have you don't have access to the public anymore. And so what had happened, it's okay. Trump was, of course, kicked off Twitter, but he's Trump. He has a platform of his own. But others who are not as well known as Trump is, they get booted off Twitter. They just don't exist. You don't exist anymore if you're not if you don't have access to this. So I think what he did with Twitter was very important. And if he makes that, that is definitely an opening for Musk. If Musk wants to challenge Trump, then the issue of free speech would absolutely be a wedge issue that he can use against Trump. He's saying, hey, Trump is using the coercive power of the state to crack down on speech that he doesn't like, and particularly when it comes to the issue of the Middle East. The way he's used this spurious fake issue of anti-Semitism to attack, obviously attacking individuals, but attacking institutions, using the coercive power of the state on this, and embracing that spurious definition of anti-Semitism. And if you're going to attack Trump on those grounds, then I think you have a future. I think that is absolutely a crucial issue, and that's why when J.D. Vance delivered that speech in Munich, that was so important. I mean, that J.D. Vance, Musk could absolutely proclaim their adherence to free speech. Now, the drawback there, and it's an obvious one, are they prepared to bite the bullet and say, yeah, free speech means people are free to speak very harshly about Israel, and that they're free to speak and condemn the pervasive influence of the Israel lobby. Now, Musk kind of backed away from that and paid his usual obeisance to Netanyahu and Israel. So if he is going to embrace the cause of free speech, he's going to have to address that issue and say, stop it already with that fake, phony definition of anti-Semitism. We that's something. Let me just think. This. Let me have to look at this. Okay. Let me. Okay. Okay. So that was the sorry about that. So that I think that would be a crucial moment in his if he's going to address other issues. Now, if you say he also incidentally brought to the fore the scandal of Ukraine early on. Yeah, I agree with that. Certainly that would also be an issue. And again, if he wants to make an issue out of interventionism and all of the sort of the foreign policy failures that Trump is now embarking on. The Trump is going to embrace that whole the Biden agenda. That's definitely an opening for him. So now, and I agree with you about the grooming gang issue, but he wasn't really the first. That's been it's been a long-standing issue about the grooming gangs, and so therefore therefore he's hardly. But it was good that he brought that up. So yeah. But I'm not dismissing him. I think if he's going to do that, raise the issue of freedom, raise the issue of this failed foreign policies and interventionism, raise the issue of the blind adherence to Israel. I think he's done a lot of good. So yeah, I don't, I don't want to be negative about him. So I think but that's fair enough. Anyway, so that's Aristotle says. It seems to me that few things are needed more than new politics in the U.S. That's true enough. And then Stone River says, meet the new President Trump, warmonger in chief. Yeah, I think the peace thing is. That's right. Anyway, thank you so much, Stone River. And then Stone River says, bombs for peace mantra knows no end. Yep, that's right. And then Robert says, I think it's a mistake. Okay, thank you, Robert. Um, I think I think it's a mistake to take what Trump says at face value. Alexander Krainer makes the case that Trump's words are often strategic misdirection meant to confuse opponents. Um, to take what Trump says at face, I think it's a mistake to take what Trump says at face value. Alexander Krainer makes the case that Trump's words are often strategic misdirection meant to confuse opponents, not explain policy. In Krainer's view, Trump operates like a grandmaster in an info war, using chaos as cover. If you understand what he's really doing, don't fixate on his tweets, watch his actions. That's where the real strategy shows up. Well, then you'd have to say, if that's the case, what's the real strategy? I mean, I'm open to that notion, but what is the strategy? And that's why it's because we have at various times thought, we thought that if if he's going to bring, we said this over and over again, the only way he can bring the war in Ukraine to an end is if he decides that he's not going to go on supporting Ukraine. I mean, that's an obvious point. If he goes on underwriting Ukraine, along with NATO and along with the Europeans, then the war continues. And so therefore, he said, but if if he continues like that, then essentially, which is what he's doing now, you'll be doing the Biden policy. So that's his actions. So now the action, so let's leave aside the word. The action would be, he would tell, those, when he met Zelensky in the Oval Office, that famous meeting, and where it was, which it was a blow up and everything. That could have been the moment you could say, yeah, that is it. You could see the action, and Trump is made clear that, well, we're not doing it anymore. We're not doing it, and we've basically brought this to an end, and that's it. He could have done it at that moment because he had only just been just won an election. He had very successful run. As he says, I won the popular vote. I won all the battleground states. I said I was going to bring peace. This is me bringing peace. I'm saying, that's it. That's far no further. We need to end it. He would have come under a lot of attack. He would have absolutely come under a lot of attack. The media would have attacked him, but that doesn't really matter. The media always attack him. But that was the moment. By not doing this, by not taking that opportunity, he is essentially now going down the path of Biden. So if one says, well, look at the action, then that's the action. Now look at the Middle East. What is the action? We keep hearing about, well, this ceasefire or that ceasefire, or then he's going to come to a deal. Remember, while he was negotiating with Iran, and we were all thinking, and we've talked about this so many times, we were all thinking that he's close to some kind of a deal with Iran. I mean, we've been doing this, over and over again. He would go, they would seem to be negotiating a JCPOA 2.0. And that's it. It was step by step. They would have Steve Witkoff, would be having meeting with Iran. I would say, okay, we're close to a deal. But instead of that, he signs off on Netanyahu attacking Iran, and then he joins in this attack. So the very peace that he was promising is now as far away as ever. There's not going to be any negotiations with Iran. I mean, why would Iran negotiate anything? Now, Iran isn't going to do anything drastic, as Iran's not going to do anything to provoke Trump, but there's not going to be a deal. So, we said, we'll look at his action. The action was, okay, he's negotiating something with Iran, and we seem to be, just a few months ago, we seem to be close to a deal. Then, it didn't happen. And here we're talking about, Gaza is, with talking with Netanyahu. And there it is. He was asked the question, well, what do you think of the two-state solution? I said, well, I'll just defer to Bibi. Apparently, there's no U.S. foreign policy position. There's no U.S. policy on the two-state solution. Apparently it's dictated entirely by Netanyahu about the two-state solution. So, and now we keep talking about this ceasefire, the ceasefire in Gaza, and yet Trump kind of keeps stepping on it. There's not going to be a ceasefire in Gaza as long as he isn't willing to put a brake on Netanyahu, because Hamas isn't going to agree to yet another ceasefire, and then Israel breaks it. That's why the Hamas has been demanding a U.S. guarantee, that Trump should guarantee that Israel isn't going to resume its attacks the moment the 60 days are up. And that's the point. The actions are quite simple. The action, you can get a deal on Iran, you can get a deal on Gaza if you're willing to rein in Netanyahu. If you're not willing to rein him in, then of course you're not going to get a deal. And if you're looking at the action, well, Trump isn't willing to rein in Netanyahu, so there's no deal on Iran, and there's going to be no deal on Gaza. And then if you're not going to rein in Ukraine, then there's not going to be a deal on Ukraine, and essentially we're just going to go on drifting three conflicts that Trump is unable to resolve. So this has nothing to do with just looking at his truths. It was just looking at his actions. Anyway, let me go back. So all right, yeah. Then so Steve, in response to the thing about Alexander Craner says Trump is mercurial, driven by emotion. He's very ignorant. Assigning 5D chess to what he does is humorous. Trump is like a CEO who comes up with some crazy ass idea. The people under him work like maniacs to make it succeed to some extent. Then the CEO is a genius. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair. I mean, I think that there are these CEOs who are convinced that they're geniuses, and they come up with the most idiotic ideas. And when predictably enough, and I've worked in companies like that. See, when this is obviously the stupidest idea imaginable, and when predictably it fails, then what happens is, well, somebody gets the blame. Well, it wasn't the CEO of this absolutely stupid idea, absolutely half baked. Oh, somebody gets the blame, and Trump's very good at throwing out blame on others, as he's doing now with this thing about who made the decision to withhold arms for Ukraine. So apparently, it's all Pete Hegseth's fault. I mean, that's why I think that the 5D chess thing is always a bad model, because I don't think that people say, oh, he was obviously playing this devious game with Iran, ensnaring Iran into this trap, thinking that America's negotiating seriously, but all along he was plotting with Netanyahu to attack Iran. I don't think that was happening. I don't think Trump has that kind of ruthlessness of doing something like that. I think he wanted a deal, and then he changed his view, having at one stage told the Iranians that we will live with some enrichment on Iranian territory. And suddenly he completely changed his position and abandoned it. And so then he said, well, okay. I mean, and the same thing with and then he signed off on an attack by Israel. But it was Trump who changed his position. There was nothing. Oh, well, this is a very elaborate ruse, because there was no ruse. He suddenly changed his view. It's same with this. With what we were talking about earlier with Putin. He said, "Oh, well, Putin is throwing bullshit at us. He talks nice, but it's it's meaningless." But Putin hasn't changed his position, just like Iran never changed his position. He has changed his position, and he seems to now have changed his position, where he seemed a few months ago to be very critical and very negative about Ukraine. Now, he thinks he thinks the world of Ukraine. We need to save Ukraine. We need to get the Ukraine to defend themselves. So I don't think I don't see the 5D chess. Anyway, Marty says Tuesday. Good evening, George and Gagglers. And there's let's see. So Marty's got this painting, George W. Bush's painting, and that's Hillary Clinton with an has the Jeff Epstein in an arm lock. Yes. And then and then Anne Marie, thank you so much for your generosity, as always. Really appreciate it. Anne Marie is, of course, our resident musical expert, a distinguished musician. And of course, her comments at the Gaggle Music Club are always important and always insightful, always worth reading. She's got wrote some very interesting comments on Wagner that I intend to address. So appreciative, but also critical, and I intend to address that. And so I'm going to address it on the Gaggle, the Gaggle Music Hub, on the Wagner posting. But and thank you so much, Anne Marie. Always really appreciate your generosity and really appreciate your fascinating comments. And then we have Steve says, George, I agree and said as much that Trump lost his opportunity to end Ukraine on day one. Blame Biden. He had another great chance when the New York Times wrote that article that we were directed at war with Russia. Pull the plug there. No, I think so. And I think that he had an opportunity after the Oval Office debacle. That would have been a great time to say, that's it. Here's this guy, comes in, he's ungrateful. We've gone out on a limb for him, and for what? That would have been the opportunity. Even last week, when the Pentagon made that announcement about, where the cupboard is bare, even then. He could have said, well, look, we just don't have enough to spare. We've got too many military commitments. We've got Taiwan, we've got deal with the Houthis, we've got to support Israel. We can't support everyone. Even as late as that, he could have done it. And then instead he changes his view and said, no, we got to send it. And he launches into this tirade against Putin, as if any of this has anything to do with Putin. But now I think it's very difficult for him. I think he's locked in. I think it's going to be almost impossible now for him to get out of it, and just to follow the Biden model. And as Steve says, sometimes it doesn't fail, but only because of the underlings. However, they get zero credit, and the big boss is brilliant. I've worked for them, and it's not imagination on my part. Oh, I agree. But I think that's the thing about, if you're CEO, you can always just simply shoot a lot of nonsense in the air. You're the boss. Everyone is fawning on you. And you can say, hey, I've got this really great idea, I know it, blah, blah. And then anybody who expresses some skepticism is immediately dismissed as a very negative person. All right, you're just negative. You're not creative and imaginative the way I am. I'm the CEO. I'm creative. I'm imaginative. I'm always seeing far ahead. And then when, of course, it ends in fiasco, then somebody else's fault for this brilliant, creative, imaginative notion doesn't get anywhere. So, but anyway, my time is up. I have to go and do an interview. So thank you, everybody who had joined me. Thank you, above all, to everyone who had contributed to the tip jar, because that's where we get the funding for the work that we do here, and it's what keeps the dogs going. So really appreciate all of that, and please look at the Gaggle Music Club. Listen to Wagner. Listen and read Anne Marie's comments, and then I'm going to respond to Anne Marie. So thank you, everybody, for today. Look forward to seeing you all again next Thursday. This Thursday. It's not next Thursday. This Thursday. So until then, all the best. Good night. See you Thursday. Bye-bye.